years, Charles Darwin University has shown national leadership in undertaking multiple Indigenous higher education projects that aim to build an evidence base about what works best for Indigenous students and why. These projects have often been undertaken in collaboration with other higher education institutions with an interest in Indigenous education. It makes it a national setting. This forum is sponsored by the Equity Practitioners in Higher Education Australasia, and provides an opportunity to hear about the emerging research findings generated by NT-based researchers, including those from the Bachelor of Institute of Tertiary Education, and how this can assist in improving Indigenous student access, participation and achievement in higher education in the NT across Australia. So thank you very much for coming today. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we head on. There is tea and coffee, and morning tea will be coming at around about 10:30. Toilets are out the door and just around the corner over there. And if we do have any emergencies in terms of fire or anything like that, we do have wardens that will help you, but really we're heading towards the car park out there. So thank you very much for coming along this morning, and I'm going to hand you over to Casuarina for our welcome.
Thank you for the respect you show us, the traditional custodians of the land we gather on today. And I want to send a warm hello and welcome and Happy New Year to our folk in Alice Springs. I give a special welcome to other elders who are here today, and to my brothers and sisters from other First Nations. Welcome. I recognise the strength of spirit and depth of knowledge that exists in both the elders of the past and present, and I know the rich tapestry of the dreaming still runs strong in our mind, body and spirit. Australian Aboriginal culture is the oldest continuous cultures on earth, and to me a welcome to country is about acknowledging the past and looking to the future. Spiritually, I am honouring the presence of my ancestors whose ancient energy flows through all creation. The Larrakia are the traditional custodians of the land and waters of the Greater Darwin region, and although our lands extend up to 50 kilometres inland, we are known as saltwater people, and we've lived in the present area of the NT for eons. And at the beginning there was one culture, the Larrakia culture, and now here on the traditional lands we have over 70 different groups of people with very diverse ethnic backgrounds, all living in harmony. Northern Australia is economically, ecologically, socially and culturally different from the rest of Australia. It is home to the world's oldest living culture, with Aboriginal people continuing to live on or near their ancestral lands. The region is also home to immense biological and cultural diversity that has become recognised as unique in world standards. This uniqueness requires protection, respect, and to be managed sustainably into the future. And this relates directly to the importance of the ongoing role Charles Darwin University plays with its very large footprint across the Northern Territory. Well, actually, across Australia, but I'm just concentrating on the NT. Our most important sacred ancestral spirit being, Darwin, which is known as Old Man Rock. He sits in the sea off the Casuarina coastline, and it is critical in keeping the Larrakia people strong and protected. He is the beginning of our important Dirilla songline, the Rainbow Serpent songline, which runs around our coastline to where the Darwin Convention Centre sits, which is our very important site of significance, Dirilla Dreaming. And today we meet on Goram Bay, the elbow of Darwin. So we are being immersed in the energy of the Rainbow Serpent. And we're currently in the season of Dale, the monsoon season. So you probably would have noticed the lightning and the rain and everything. But it's when the creeks and rivers are all filling up, the crocodiles are laying their eggs on the floodplains, and the barramundi are also laying their eggs. So it's a really good time of, replenishment. So it is on that note, it is my privilege on behalf of my elders past and present to welcome you all to Wawadara land. Welcome to my saltwater home, great food, friendly people, beautiful beaches and spectacular sunsets. Larrakia country is like a pearl with many different layers of different peoples of different cultures living and loving in this deeply spiritual place. You are walking on Larrakia land and putting your footprints in the sands of Ulmeodagen. When you leave, our message will stay with you. So I hope your stay in my country is a safe and nourishing one, and that the spirits of my ancestors watch over you while you are here. All that I ask in return is that you walk softly on Mother Earth and treat her with love and respect, as the Larrakia people do. And this is a very exciting workshop, and I wish you all the best for the day. So, Mamak Bachua, thank you.
Can I begin by extending my sincere thanks to equity practitioners in Higher Education Australia for sponsoring this forum, and to the team within CDU's Office of Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Indigenous Leadership for their organisational support. I, of course, will formally commence by acknowledging the Larrakia people, who are the traditional custodians of the land upon which we are gathered here in Darwin, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to the traditional owners of the country in Alice Springs, upon which our Alice Springs campus sits, in which we have colleagues engaging today, the Arana. But I also want to extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, who are the rightful caretakers of the land and the keepers of the stories that have been passed down on this continent for almost an unimaginable span of time. This is a significant and challenging year for this university and this place in Australia, I think. In a couple of weeks' time, we will look forward to celebrating with colleagues all around the world, I think, the 210th anniversary of the birthday of the namesake of this university, Charles Darwin. Someone whose thinking at the time was pretty radical, and who certainly shaped the future that we all now enjoy in terms of how we understand, from a Western perspective, this place in which we sit. This year also is the 150th anniversary of the establishment of the first European settlement here in what then was Port Darwin, the community established as Palmerston then. And that, I think, causes us to take a moment in the course of this year to reflect on the challenging and tragic wrongdoings in the past, but perhaps to draw out of that the energy that we need to commit to a better future. And that, I think, is the story that is embedded in a lot of what you're going to address today. The importance of a forum about shaping the future is that we actually have come an awful long way, and there are some amazingly positive things to be celebrating about empowering where we go within Indigenous communities in this country, because there are some really important things to acknowledge. I think that we are doing better than we've ever done before. In 2011, in June, a statement of commitment to reconciliation was signed by the then Vice-Chancellor, Professor Barney Glover, with CDU's Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Indigenous Leadership, Professor Steve Larkin, and the Chair of CDU's Vice-Chancellor's Indigenous Advisory Council, who was at that time Dr. Jack Arkin. And that stated in part that Charles Darwin University recognises the social, cultural and natural endowments of the Northern Territory, and is committed to the advancement and prosperity of our region and the nation. With a Territory Indigenous population of around 30%, CDU is committed to becoming a preferred choice for Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students seeking studies in higher education and vocational education and training, and a leader in the teaching and understanding of Indigenous knowledge systems. CDU acknowledges that colonisation and past public policies have impacted on the lives of the First Peoples and marginalised many. Prejudice and systemic racism continue to affect Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. CDU recognises the important role our public institution can play in the achievement of genuine and sustainable reconciliation in Australia. We are proud of the achievements of our distinguished Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, graduates, staff, committee members and laureates, and respect the cultural richness and the diversity of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population. CDU aims to continue building a university culture and demographic that reflects the society within which we are based, and we hereby reaffirm our commitment to Indigenous participation. So that was 2011. Now we are in 2019, and the university commitment to Indigenous participation remains as strong as ever. The university's resolve to be a responsible contributor to helping to achieve the best possible life outcomes for Indigenous people stands firm. Last year, Universities Australia, representing all 40-odd higher education institutions in Australia, released its first collective Indigenous strategy. I think that's an important development to see. We're seeing a plethora of additional appointments now being made across institutions in Australia. I accepted at the end of last year appointment as UA's lead Vice-Chancellor Indigenous. My one problem with that is that we still don't have an Indigenous Vice-Chancellor, but at least people are starting to identify the significance of articulating the need to have Indigenous input into all these strategies. But I hope that strategy will see some of the things that places like CDU are testing, trying, delivering, and the sorts of outcomes that this forum will reflect upon in terms of the research being undertaken to be better promulgated across the entire sector, across this continent. This is not a space in which one size will fit all. And I struggle with many government policies that still need to learn how to be nuanced for place-based impact. In 2009, CDU was the first university in Australia to appoint an executive leadership position, at that time a Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Indigenous Leadership, which was concurrent with the establishment of the PVC's office. In 2011, the university established the Vice-Chancellor's Indigenous Advisory Council. These undertakings, amongst others, have seen a steady increase in Indigenous student enrolments and participation at CDU over the past decade. And if I reflect upon the numbers, some 30% of our vocational education and training students are Indigenous. That is population parity. That's not bad. In higher education, 7%. So there's another gap that we have to bridge, but both those numbers are better than any other institution in Australia is delivering in terms of population percentage engagement. So we should at least acknowledge that some good things are happening, but it just reinforces again how much further we've got to go if we're going to seriously address some of these outcomes. So notwithstanding that we've got a lot to reflect upon and feel very proud of, our commitment, however, to Indigenous education and engagement remains very strong. And it's important to acknowledge that it does stretch back decades through several incarnations of the institutions that collectively led to what we know today as Charles Darwin University. The Office of the Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Indigenous Leadership has had a pivotal role in providing advice and advocacy services to both academic and professional staff around working with Indigenous students, communities and organisations. But this actually has to be embraced right across the university. It has to be something that is owned by all managers at all levels in every corner of this place. So I was very pleased that CDU prioritised Indigenous leadership as a key pillar in our strategic plan called Connect, Discover, Grow, which articulates an obligation to improving Indigenous higher education outcomes over the longer term. This year, we will, as a university, continue to work on new structures and approaches to delivery that should make us more capable of delivering on the implementation strategy for this pillar under our strategic plan. During the past 5 years, CDU has led more than $8.7 million in applied research relating to Indigenous higher education, the majority led through the Indigenous Leadership Research and Evaluation Network within the Office of the Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Indigenous Leadership. The research projects led by CDU include an exploration of Indigenous higher education strategy and policy development in the NT, one on Indigenous pathways and transitions into higher education, including VET to higher education pathways, the identification of strategies to strengthen Indigenous student engagement, participation, success and completions in higher education, including those relating to remote education contexts, a project on a strengths-based exploration of self-efficacy amongst Indigenous students, evaluation in Indigenous higher education context in Australia, and last but not least, one on building the Indigenous academic workforce. You will hear more about the recommendations from these research projects throughout today. In many cases, the projects have been undertaken in collaboration with other institutions, including Batchelor Institute of Indigenous Tertiary Education, Central Queensland University, Swinburne University of Technology, the University of South Australia, the University of Newcastle, and James Cook University. It is through enduring partnerships that we can define new understandings to best support Indigenous students from both urban and remote locations across Australia. CDU has received 2 Australian Rural Education Awards from the Society for the Provision of Rural Education in Australia in 2016 and 2018 for projects that demonstrate a proven link between a rural, regional and/or remote school or learning context and the local community and benefiting a defined group. In both instances, the defined group was Indigenous students. Today's forum, I hope, provides a safe place to allow all of you to reflect about and discuss the findings of this world-class Indigenous higher education research with a view to shaping improved policy and practice in Indigenous higher education here at Charles Darwin University. I very much look forward to hearing more about the inferences that will undoubtedly be wrought from your presentations and conversations and the way these might be incorporated into CDU's unflinching commitment to Indigenous higher education participation and achievement. I very much regret that I can't stay and spend the entire day with everybody. The one problem in a role like this is you never get to control your own time. But I wish you all very well, and I very much look forward to hearing from all the leaders that are here where your discussions take us and lead us into the future. And I assure you from myself down, this commitment and our intent is absolutely strong. And I very much value and thank you for contributing your time to today's deliberations, and I look forward to the outcomes. Thank you very much indeed.
Some acknowledgements to the people in the room who've had some longevity with this organisation in its various forms, and I'm looking at my good friend over there. Just slightly, we arrived in the same year maybe? Yes, and I did we did the diploma, didn't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
The bachelor.
And then the bachelor after that, but the bachelor was a new thing when Donna and I went through, so this was 92, 90, 99, 91, 92, and then we graduated in 92 with a diploma of teaching, and Donna and I, as philosophers, we hold that to be the degree for teaching, because it's for teaching, not theoretical education, which we had to get later on, for the new award at the time. Remember that, Shane? That was fun. So Donna and I did an extra year and did an extra year of HEX, didn't we? So that was good. That was a cost to us. So that's where I started here. I arrived here in '89. So Christmas this year, I'll have been here 30 years. And you know, just a simple country boy from Queensland, far north, in the deep north to be exact. Arrived here fresh from what is now the Department of Education of Griffith University. It used to be one of the old College of Advanced Education in Brisbane. So in Brisbane there were 4, and each of those colleges have now been absorbed into different universities. Prior to that, and I still maintain this to this day, I'm a cowboy. That's all I am. I'm a cowboy with a degree, with a teaching diploma, an education degree, and 2 postgrad quals in business. Masters by research. So maybe I'm a cowboy who can read a bit. But at the end of the day, I'm a cowboy, and I see things very simply. To give you an example, following on from the Vice-Chancellor's comments about our these universities leading the nation in terms of having an Indigenous position at the executive, Pro-Vice-Chancellor on Indigenous leadership. The appointment was made in 2009, but the original concept and PD, a draft PD, was written in 1997. And that's when the cafe over there, well, that building that houses the cafe was first built. I and 2 other staff that were working here at the time were trying to figure out how we're going to respond to Howard's reforms in higher ed funding. The first things that happened in higher ed funding reforms in end of 96 and beginning of 97 was universities across the nation who had then slashed their Aboriginal centres, and if there wasn't Aboriginal centres, they slashed their faculty, Aboriginal faculties, because there was a number of them around the nation. So they went to the easy targets and they absorbed that funding in order to get eligibility for Howard's funding reform. I haven't walked back just recently. That's version 2, and we're living with version 2.5 right now. So that's interesting. But then it's 97. So 97 to 2001. What's that? How many years is that? It's over 10. 12. I thought I had 11 with my math. So I'm a cowboy, not a mathematician. But that's, for us, that's how slow the wheels would turn. What you will hear now over the course of the day is from my experience, from Howard's era, and those educational policies that came out of Commonwealth, and then you see the territory response to that. We don't go into, it'd be interesting to do state and territory response and do a comparison. That's somebody's PhD project there, I think. And then another one which we may go into it, we may touch on it during the day, but there is the federal policies and then the NT response to that. So Kat and I will actually kick off the morning with a talk about that particular piece of work that we've done just recently. And it's very brief, it's by no means finished, and we haven't gone into great detail about the federal eras of policy and then the state and territory responses out of that. So that's someone else's PhD project again for those who are doing education. So there's a lot of work to be done. Any questions for me in this early stage? Come on, Pete. You're burning, I can see you. You're just going to throw them out.
Looking forward to the session.
And you're going to hand it after that.
Sorry?
We'll hand it after that.
Yeah. Well, and a little bit of status quo on our organisation at the moment in terms of stats. I'm really not happy with Griffith University because they pipped us in student enrolment numbers last year in the undergraduate. We had about 750 odd last year, and they've got about another 20 or 30 more, so I'm not happy with that. And to all my friends in Griffith that hopefully will be surpassing that this year. So there is a bit of competition between us and Griffith. That means Griffith is the national leader in enrolments. We're second. We're very close second. And 2 years ago we were the first. So things are looking good. Now, the difference though, this is what I tell my Griffith friends, they have a specific marketing program. We don't. Our numbers go up each year with very little effort in marketing in terms of Indigenous undergraduate enrolments. So our pool, it keeps growing. If we chuck some money at it and did a specific marketing program, I'm sure that we could fit with it. In fact, if we did a local NT program, we'd probably fit them this year. Nothing would give you greater pleasure than giving. Yes, Laura.
I want to add my acknowledgement to the traditional owners, and I really want to thank you for inviting me today. If you're not familiar with EFIA, which is the shorthand version, it's much easier than Equity Practitioners in Higher Education Australasia. We're the National Professional Association for people working in higher education to support staff and student equity. And the aim of the practitioners that are across both Australia and New Zealand is to support underrepresented groups into higher education and into employment. So something like today is really important. Our practitioners work across most of the higher education institutions here in Australia. We've got about 6 institutions represented in New Zealand as well. Those practitioners can sometimes work in isolation. So EFIA provides a support network for those people. And we also aim to provide state chapters, or in the case of New Zealand, who's not a state, and either is Northern Territory for that matter, so state or country chapters or territory chapters that allow people to come together for local issues and to discuss things that are happening contextually in their particular institutions, in their state or territory, or areas where they can compare and contrast with other people. Our practitioners pull together the work that they do in a really practical sense, as well as drawing on important research that's developing. And it can be really difficult to find out what's going on nationally in terms of good practice and research. So hopefully EFIA helps to do that. One of the reasons I'm here today is a little bit of a spruiking for us, because Northern Territory is one of the few places that we don't have a state chapter or territory chapter, and I'm really wanting to explore that option with any of you that are interested. We're trying to get people into networks constantly, either by local activity like today, or to become part of our national email list, newsletters, and our biennial conference. Our conference this year is in hosted by University of Wollongong, and it again looks to be an exciting program for people. So I've left some flyers and things about EFIA and about the conference, and I'd really encourage you to attend. It's in November, so I'd say a little bit cooler, but actually I'm from Queensland normally, and it's cooler here than Queensland at the moment. So it's an exciting chance to get together and network with people who are in like-minded activities as yourselves, and we can link you up to other people who are undertaking similar research or practice in your particular area. And we don't have those big lizards in Wollongong, so it might be nice to get away from one beach area to another beach area, and enjoy that collegiality that happens. So I'll be here for the day, furiously writing notes and hoping to share some of what I learned today with other members of EFIA. We have over 700 members, so we do encourage you to join us as well. And we've got Twitter, and we've got LinkedIn, and we've got our email subscriptions, and all that information is on these flyers and on the website. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to be here, and especially for James inviting me to